guys, that's a look at Venus taken at 6 in the morning earlier. Kind of a very bright star, and in some cases that star or that planet was mistaken for UFOs. If you go back to the historical record there, shining brightly there through the pine trees. Anyway, we've recovered as far as temperatures, back up to about 80 degrees in our part of Texas, and outside right now, there's what it looks like, and we're losing daylight pretty quickly now. And the daytime loss in terms of minutes per day, it's going to be peaking here in a couple weeks. So rapidly the days are getting shorter. Okay, let's see. Let's head to the charts and see what's going on. Southeasterly flow in our part of Texas, and very light winds in Louisiana and Arkansas. That's kind of a reflection of the Bermuda High, some of the ridging extending over the southwest states there. As far as dew points, we're looking at upper 60s across much of Texas, so not much in the way of very rich moisture. We do have a few thunderstorms in the Abilene area, and we can see that a little bit better on the SPC charts. Yeah, there we go. Little cluster of multi-cell storms in that area, and just north of there looks like we got a weak front pushing through the panhandles. As far as the big picture, there's the remnants of Harvey, pretty much parked over Ohio and Kentucky. There's a look at the state outlines. And when we go to the central U.S., we can see quite a bit of smoke here across parts of Kansas and Nebraska, South Dakota there. And the origin has been the wildfire activity in British Columbia on the west coast right there. As far as out in the Atlantic, we've got Irma out at about 50 degrees west, roughly 16 or 17 north, and that's continuing to push eastward or westward. Here's the NHC chart here. We were seeing Category 3 yesterday, and we've seen, looks like a very slight weakening. The Cat 2, 110 knot winds there, 973 millibars, and yeah, that's continuing to push westward. And here's the forecast track. So we're seeing a west-southwestward drift on there, and it should be grazing Puerto Rico here in a few days around Wednesday. And then we're looking at the storm arriving out in the Florida, South Carolina area. To give you some idea of what we're looking at, the European forecast, if I can figure out where I put it, there it is. This is the European forecast model from this morning, and very spectacular when you head out to about Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Pressure's 921 millibars as it passes the Bahamas, and I saw the GFS had forecast something like 917 millibars. Now let me try to find the strongest hurricanes on record by pressure, because we're certainly getting pretty low here. So I'm going to take a look at Wikipedia here and find one of those lists that has the pressure sorted in here. Looks like these are categorized by miles per hour. Yeah, here we go. So for the North Atlantic, Wilma 882. So That's going to be near the record Gilbert, of course, back in '88. So we're looking at about 5 storms here that went under 900 millibars. So if we actually got down to 920, 919, we would be kind of in this range right here, about as strong as Hugo, possibly stronger than Andrew, and kind of bracketed there by Ivan, 2004, and Dean. So got quite a storm. And European model bringing that, just grazing the east coast here. GFS has a more pessimistic look at the track, and let me bring that up real quick. This is the deterministic GFS. This is the high resolution run, and you can see they're bringing that past the Bahamas and then making landfall up the Chesapeake Bay area. This would, of course, be devastating for parts of eastern Virginia, but likely we're going to see a much different pattern than what you see here. In fact, if we look at the ensemble runs, this is actually a lower version run of the GFS. And we're seeing 20 different views here with slightly different initialization conditions. And there's a look at the hurricane where it makes landfall. So we're seeing very different pictures. We have some members here bringing it through Florida. There's another one that's going for Florida. We have a few of them bringing it through the Carolinas. So here's one. There's another one bringing it through the Carolinas. And then there are a couple of others bringing it more towards Delaware and Long Island. And if we actually look at the landfall of all the ensemble members, this is what it looks like here. This is from the 12Z Global Forecast System ensembles. So it looks like we've got a pretty good grouping of runs going through the Outer Banks of the Carolinas, pretty much right in line with a high-resolution GFS. And then we have another clustering around the Carolinas, and then just 3 outliers in Florida. So if I was looking to gamble money, I would probably go with something like that right there. And of course, the European model, kind of an outlier, and this is a comparison between the deterministic European and GFS. So the European, a little bit slower, initially a little bit further west, and then pretty rapid recurvature here around the 11th and 12th. GFS going for more of a northerly, faster track, and then bringing that straight inland. So it's really going to be interesting to see which one pans out here. So at this point, we just don't know. We're going to have to wait at least about 4 or 5 days before the picture becomes clear. All right, let's head to the satellite data. I guess that's good to get the hurricane stuff out of the way, because I know that's what everybody's waiting for. So we'll probably come back to a little bit more of that in a bit, but let's take a look at the rest of the weather. You can see the remains of that other hurricane that was in the Baja California area, spraying a lot of moisture across southern Arizona, the El Paso area, and the Sonoran Desert. There's the moisture, and we can see quite a bit of that moisture spreading into that area right there. So we're going to have to see if we're going to have to contend with that here in Texas. Very often with these landfalling hurricanes, the moisture does make it over the mountains and then feeds into activity here in Texas. We have seen that, I know, remember with one storm back in 93, 94 where we did that. The thickness and pressure looking like this. Very good baroclinicity in western Canada. So this is the basic pattern of where the fronts are. Baroclinic system right there around Calgary. And looks like a little bit of that warm front possibly extends through the Texas area, somewhere in this region. This is the theta chart. And in this region here of southeastern Montana, looks like a little bit of divergence in that area, spreading the contrasts apart. Looks like some of the better convergence kind of in this area, so I might be inclined to put that warm front through this area here. And then here in Texas we see kind of a backdoor front, so I think ultimately I would probably go with a position something like that right there. Okay, so back to the satellite. This is the visible imagery, and let me take a look at the chat here. We have Alex Front here and Ron Chalfant in Southern California. More thunderstorms and some rain. And we can see a little bit of that off to the edge of the map there. You can see a bit of the Salton Sea there, getting a little bit of that cirrus coming out of the Mexican desert there. Chilly and overcast in North Indiana where Alex Front is. Sue M says the rain from Harvey has stopped, preparing for 40s this week. Okay, we got Ryan here watching Irma, prepping for these storms. Michael Burrell joining us, and Kevin McKinney, also Carl Burkhoff. TD also here. Carl Burkhoff mentioning their air was rather hazy this afternoon with smoke in Wisconsin. Eyes watering there. No air quality alert. And Ryan calling that weakening of Irma just temporary. And yeah, Andrew Hotchkiss says 917 millibars would be bad. Definitely agree there. Sarah says a line of rain coming through northern Indiana right now. Irma dipped a little further south today from Ryan there. GFS attack on Washington with Irma, pretty much. And Ryan saying too many variables with steering at this moment to really pin that down. And if Irma is Category 5 and makes landfall in the U.S., that could cripple things. Definitely. Category 5 impacts always severe when that happens, and all of the GFS runs going for some sort of landfall, except for one member there on the ensembles. 19 ensembles bringing landfall onto the U.S. coast, and only, actually all 20 of them actually were bringing landfall. We had just kind of one outlier in the Cape Cod area. European model, though, that is keeping it out to sea. So, much different picture there. We just can't get any agreement between the European and North American models. Okay. So let's, what should we do here? We're a little bit out of sequence, so I think we'll take a look at the long wave pattern. And let's see, we've got that ridge, breaking that down there in central Canada, troughing taking place. And for today, we're looking like that right there. So troughing over the Great Lakes, indicating a lot of cold air at the surface there. That frontal system in Alberta, that's kind of left high and dry underneath this ridge. The ridge not being a very good area for frontogenesis. So we may see that frontal system kind of stuck there for a day or two. And then as that trough approaches, maybe tomorrow or the next day, we should see that take off southeastward. And very strong troughing out in the Atlantic. Looks like a bit of a negative tilt trough here out there in the Atlantic. And here's the 250 millibar chart showing that very strong troughing and also the strong ridging across Alberta. So cold area there for the Great Lakes and Midwest. Harvey making an impact there. And in Texas, we're even getting some of that northerly flow aloft there. And then for the 850 millibar chart, this is from UCAR. So is Harvey out over Tennessee? Western Tennessee, the far western part of Kentucky. This is kind of a good idea why it's a good idea to pay attention to the dates, because this server here is putting out old maps. So old data. So that's the reason I brought up the 850 millibar chart from Canada. So now we can see the 850 millibar low pretty much centered over Lexington and Cincinnati. So the remains just kind of circulating there. And I guess we can probably head into the forecast. Probably the most active area right now is going to be the Midwest, so we'll take a look at things up there and look at the high-resolution rapid refresh. So even there looks like a bit of ridging. The center of the high over northern Mississippi and putting the area there in Indiana, Illinois under westerly flow. So tonight we're just going to see kind of a progressive westerly flow across Indiana, Illinois. A little bit of troughing coming through, and that's helping to get some showers going overnight. And those will move pretty quickly eastward. So we'll be done with Harvey here in about a day or two. Okay, so we'll look at the GFS, starting with the earlier charts. Okay, so system coming out of Alberta, and then for tomorrow night when we do the webcast, it looks like we do get some of the air sinking out of Montana and North Dakota. I guess the air is just so dense up here with the colder air, it's just kind of pushing southward. So we do get a little development there in the Dakotas. And now we'll see the system emerge out into the Great Plains for Monday night. Spreading southward about 10 to 15 miles an hour. You can see the Bermuda High spreading over the southeast U.S. there. And then around Tuesday or Wednesday, maybe closer to Wednesday, we'll have a better idea where that hurricane's going to be moving. In the meantime, cold air spreading southward. We've been seeing this over the past week. The colder air coming out over the Great Lakes. And I think even here the European model kind of excelled because it was bringing some of the colder air more to the southeast. I remember the GFS was trying to push that pretty aggressively towards Texas. So I think once again we're looking for pretty good accuracy with the European model. So we'll see what the GFS has. Bringing the hurricane pretty strongly to the north-northwest there, making landfall in the Chesapeake Bay area. You can see the remains spread into Pennsylvania. If that actually happened, we would see widespread flooding throughout much of Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Maryland there. And then towards the end there, around the 15th, 16th, look at this here. It looks like a bit of a tropical storm coming up into the Gulf of Mexico area, making landfall around Pensacola. And the European model did not have anything like that. We'll look it over one more time. Yeah, there's the European model. Irma pretty much staying far to the east. And that's the last frame I have. Looks pretty clear, although this is only the 12th. So I guess there's still plenty of time for something to come together. The first indication of any problems on the GFS model, that was around probably the 11th. We're going to have to zoom that out. So let me do that real quick. Okay, so maps are going to be a little bit busier, but this way we can tell what's going on out in the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean. So we're loading the maps here. Looking at the GFS run, waiting for the frames to come in, and let me see what we got going on. Got quite a crowd here. Good grief, 34 people. Yeah, we're checking out Irma. I'll probably go over the data one more time. And you are welcome to talk about it in chat. Little discussion there about RadarScope Pro. Carl Burkhoff says McGuides can pull about 30 days of data, rather resource intensive for a computer. And speaking about McGuides, I actually removed AWIPS from my computer because I don't think anybody's maintaining that program. There haven't been any really new releases in like 7 or 8 months, and a lot of the frames there, I cannot get those working. And at this point, it was just kind of taking up space. Okay, so yeah, it looks like something is coming together near Puerto Rico. Let me check my preview window, make sure you can see that. So this is pretty far out there. And what I'm talking about is this area here around Dominica and Puerto Rico. That could be the next system moving towards the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf states. It comes together, I guess, around Guadalupe. I'm trying to remember all the islands, but that's where it happens. That's going to be around the 9th and 10th where we see that coming together. So they just kind of drift eastward along the Cuban coast around the 13th and 14th, and then picking up steam here in the Gulf, and then making landfall towards the very end. Again, this is very far out, 384 hours for the 18th. But what I'm looking at is whether the European model was showing anything in that area, and no, not really. So it seems like we would have seen something around this area, so we'll just have to continue monitoring that. And then you see the track of Irma, European model bringing it very rapidly eastward or westward, pressure bottoming out around 921 millibars, which is close to Category 5, and then we see that spreading north. And then here's those tracks. Actually, where did those go? Yeah, here they are. This is the final operational models GFS comparison there between the EC and WF. So by the 10th, GFS bringing that almost to the North Carolina coast, heading northwest, and the European model recurving that and bringing that to the northeast. And a little bit slower there, actually. So that's the forecast, and then the GFS. These are all the ensemble runs run at lower resolution, but all of the ensembles making landfall anywhere from about Miami, little clustering there in the South Carolina region, and then another little clustering more in line with the operational GFS in the Chesapeake Bay area, Delaware, and Maryland there. So this looks to be probably the most likely solution at this point, either that or something along the lines of the European model where it just kind of grazes the Cape Cod area, but there's no way to really know. At this point, you could probably get better results just going to a fortune teller. So we're going to have to wait for about 4 or 5 days before we have a better idea what's going to happen. So this is just all crystal ball forecasting at this point. And I think that's probably about all I have in the long term. I guess we can look at see what's going on in the polar regions. See if we have any more polar air coming down. Because here we have the benefit of thickness. We can check that out. And yeah, it looks pretty busy up there in the Nunavut Northwest Territories area around the 8th or 9th. Looks like a little bit of polar air generation in the western Arctic in this region here. Quite a bit of warm air advection in this region. Here comes the next system. Yeah, I'm just kind of seeing what's going on there, because if we do generate a very large amount of polar air, that would come blasting south at some point. And it looks like through the whole run, any cold air just stays locked up in the polar regions there. Looks like we have kind of a dominant southwesterly pattern, maybe with a lot of long-wave troughing out over the Pacific coast. So with that in place, strong zonal component, that should keep most of the polar air in place up in northern Canada. But that could mean kind of a wet storm track in this area here. We're talking about the Pacific Northwest up to western Canada. Okay, and then for the Gulf, yeah, the GFS bringing that other system around the 17th and 18th, somewhere around the eastern Gulf area, right there. So that's about all I've got at this point. Most of the big weather changes coming up next week, and we'll just have to look those over tomorrow to see what's going on. Okay, so I think that's about all I got here. Again, thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see y'all tomorrow. So take care and have a good rest of your weekend. Thanks.